Hello, we're going to talk about what to do when you have too many ideas for your landscaping project. Welcome in. If you can hear me and you can see me, if you don't mind giving me a thumbs up, if you're here watching the replay too, please continue to ask questions in the comments. I like to follow up with people who are watching the replay. Looks like we got somebody here. Welcome. Thanks for being here today. I'm going to go live on Instagram right now too. Here we go. Drum roll. Hello. Today we're going to talk about what to do if you have too many ideas for your landscaping project. So last time we talked about blank canvas overwhelm. Today I want to talk about option overwhelm. There's overlap between those two topics. They're similar, but there are differences as well. And you'll probably notice I've got a new setup today. So it's like every time I go live here, I'm going to be playing with all kinds of new gadgets. So if you are working on a landscaping project, I'd love to hear in the chat. I've got folks on Instagram, and I'm going to be navigating back and forth between these two chat windows. Perfect. Awesome. Every time you all give a thumbs up on the video, I can see that. Appreciate that so much. So the two different kinds of overwhelm I think are most common at the start of a project, or the things that if I'm helping someone with a project, they'll say, man, I've just got this blank canvas. I'm overwhelmed. I don't know what to do. The other thing I hear really frequently is I have way too many ideas. Which ideas are right? Where do I start? And they're both overwhelm, slightly different combinations of situations. And the solutions, there actually is quite a bit of overlap between. So last time in the last live stream, and for those of you, if you didn't catch that live stream, the replay is available. It's on YouTube. It's on Instagram as well. If you go to YouTube and you go to the main channel page for Garden Project Academy, you can toggle to live. That's just a separate menu. And the live stream replays, of course, these are going to be a little bit more conversational, different from my edited content. You can watch those replays in that particular menu. So the last time that we talked about blank canvas overwhelm, we went over just an introduction to form follows function and how thinking about how you'd like to spend time in the space, that should be informing one of the primary things that's informing what you create with your landscape design layout plan. So if you have a blank canvas or you have a ton of ideas thinking about how you would like to spend time outside, the space, the design of the space should be reflected around that, because environmental design, the way that things are laid out, can have a huge influence on our behavior, how comfortable we are spending time on the space, and that influences what we do in the space. That's also a really great way to deal with that blank canvas overwhelm. But then if you're somebody who has all of the ideas, then you still might, that strategy can be helpful if you think about prioritizing, but it's not quite as helpful. So I have a couple specific ways to help people prioritize. When everything sounds like fun, you have a million ideas, maybe you have some limitations to what physically can fit into your yard, or you have budget limitations. What are you going to do first and second? One of my favorite ways to go about this is learning from the space. So a site survey, the characteristics of the space should be informing the layout. If you have a corner of your landscape design that's maybe a little bit muddy during the winter, and you have a little bit of a wetland situation there, and whenever possible, it's ideal that you create your landscape design layout plan keeping all of the characteristics, the existing characteristics of the space in mind, and whenever possible, turning that into an asset. So an example of something that someone has done with, a mucky corners, planting a wetland garden, right? Putting stepping stones in for kids to play and kind of hop over the space, simulating a creek situation, like a dry creek bed. River rocks not required, right? But you can create that effect. Some people will design a bridge over that. So that's just one example of how the characteristics of the space can inform the layout. So we have thinking about how you want to spend time in the space. We also have the characteristics of the space. Those things should be both informing the layout of the space and of your finished design. And then a trick, again, when you have so many ideas, the site survey, the characteristics of the space, they can help you generate some of the most creative ideas if you're trying to work with what you already have. And that's also creating a little bit of a limitation, and as far as what you can do, it can help you prioritize. So, okay, I might have 30 ideas for my space. Which of my ideas could work with the space that I already have? That's how the site survey specifically can help you prioritize when you have a ton of ideas. Something else I like to do, I like to talk to people about what maintenance activities they enjoy most. For many people, spending time outside is mostly their, most of the time some people spend in their yards, it's actually doing yard work or doing maintenance in the space. There are so many other different ways that we can be spending time outside. That's the form follows function, thinking about goals, activities, and uses. We talked about that in that last live stream. The fun ways to spend time outside, we should be thinking about those too. But we also should look at the maintenance activities that we enjoy most. So I'm going to check in on the chat. Anybody who's here watching, where'd my mouse go? There it is. Anybody who's here watching live, also, I'd love for this to be a Q&A. If you have questions about your project in particular, things that you would like some help with, feel free to drop your questions. I'll keep, Wireback Candle says you love, as far as maintenance activities goes, you love deadheading your flowers. And so, and any of those of you who are new to gardening, the act of, deadheading of flowers when something has finished blooming, if you cut off the dead flower heads, it depends on the plant, but sometimes if you cut off the dead flower heads, the spent flower heads, that'll encourage the plant to produce more blooms. I love growing dahlias. Dahlias are something, once they start blooming, as long as you continue cutting those blooms, so you cut them for cut flowers, you turn them into bouquets, give them to people, that plant will just keep producing blooms and until the first frost. So that's my favorite version of deadheading, which is cutting the flowers before they've dried up completely. But I'm with you on that. Deadheading, it's very therapeutic. Anyone else have any favorite maintenance activities or favorite ways to spend time outside? In general, we could talk about that a little bit too. But yeah, when you have a ton of ideas for your space, thinking about, like, let's say we wrote them all out on a list. Every idea that you have for your space is going to have some maintenance activity associated with it. Then what you could do is go down that list and prioritize based on which of those activities you enjoy most. It's just another way to help you when you have 1,000 ideas, to help you prioritize those ideas. I know so many people who feel like it's necessary to have a lawn in their landscape. A lawn is not necessarily a bad thing. It's its own unique category of maintenance, though I've had clients time and time again who greatly dislike lawn care in general. And even if in a really small space, they felt like that was having a lawn, even a small patch of lawn, was a very necessary part of the landscape. Sometimes it just doesn't occur to us just how many options we have to customize that space based on maintenance. So thank you all for being here live too. Again, any questions that you have for working on your landscaping project in general, I'd love to help out with that. I'd also love to hear your favorite maintenance activity if you enjoy a particular activity. So for me, this doesn't really count as maintenance, but I really love propagating plants. Most of my yard, it's essentially a plant nursery. I love taking cuttings. I love starting seeds. I love potting things up and then being able to share these with people. That is, to me, it's not work at all. It's one of my favorite things to do. My favorite ways to spend time outside. But everything in my space, I prioritize this in the layout of my yard and all of the other features that are a part of my yard. I have a little greenhouse. I have tables for plants. I have irrigation that's kind of fed to different places where I have lots of containers hanging out. This is just another way to kind of bring those priorities to the surface. So I'm going to go back to my notes here and double check. How are we doing? Okay, so the difference between blank canvas overwhelm and option overwhelm, we talked about that. We talked about, last time we touched on form follows function. Last time we talked about site survey a little bit, touched on that some more as well. And we also talked about inspiration as a form of prioritizing what goes into the landscape. So let's talk about this when you have too many ideas. Again, different from blank canvas overwhelm, option overwhelm, too many ideas. It's really common in the design process. The person who tends to have too many ideas will collect a million photographs for inspiration for their space. When I saw a thumbs up, can somebody relate to that? Are you somebody who has collected a million ideas? I am one of those people. I've got a large Pinterest board full of tons of ideas for the space, more than could ever fit in the space. I have just a part of the design process. I ask all of my students and my clients, you have to prioritize 3 to 5. As wild as that sounds, you have to process of elimination, find 3 to 5 photos that when you look at them, you just love them. And using the subtraction method is typically the best way to go about this, where you just take one away. Some people will even print off the pictures. I mean, maybe not all 800 pictures on your Pinterest board, but having, sending like a local photo print shop, send in the photos that you have and just get a stack of printed photos and just go through and sort and prioritize physically. That can be really helpful. Just to see, if you were to take something away, which pieces of inspiration are the hardest to let go of. That could be a helpful strategy, but it is necessary. It's very necessary to prioritize down to about 3 to 5. I even encourage folks to pick one that they like best. Another thing that can help with this prioritization of inspiration, there's a sentence for you, is what qualifies as a really good piece of inspiration that will give us enough details about how to design the layout of that space. The best pictures are the ones that are not, like, let's take an interior design comparison. If you take a picture of a wall or a picture of a shelf, for example, that can teach you a lot about the colors you like, some of the materials, your style a little bit. It's information, but it's not providing quite the level of information that's helpful. I encourage everyone who's preparing for a landscaping project, you're collecting good inspiration. You want a picture of what is essentially a room. You want to see what's in the background, what's in the foreground. There's probably some sort of purpose or use associated with that space. A lot of times it's a seating area. That's just the most common version. There's some set of furniture, or there's a bench or table and chairs. But there can be many other different purposes or uses associated with a space. Greenhouse is a focal point, right? A lot of times the best inspiration is going to be something that includes something in the background, something in the foreground. You can see something that's covering the soil. You can see some sort of function or purpose to that space in addition to it being beautiful. And there should be then multiple garden beds. You can see a little bit more. It's a little bit more zoomed out. So I like to compare that, instead of it being a picture of a bookshelf or a wall, it's a picture of a room. And so if you're trying to narrow down all of your 1 million ideas for the space, you have 1 million pictures. That just eliminating all of the pictures that are a little bit more close up, just at the start, until you have fewer options, then you can prioritize which is your favorite of those photos that include just a little bit more information. And those are the best photos to reverse engineer, to turn into essentially a recipe that you can use to recreate in your space. So I've got some questions in Instagram. Thank you so much for being here. Anyone who's got questions about your project. So I see on Instagram, I've got, I'm in zone 7B. I always struggle with the ground cover between cottage and modern and what you like. Tell me more about, so I see share Insta. Tell me more about your ground cover questions. Share some more details about that. And then your styles. Yes, there are, one thing I like to say, you struggle with ground cover plantings. Awesome. So first thing I'm going to talk about is when you're between styles, most people are a combination. And there's surprisingly only so many landscape design styles out there. There's some very common ones, right? Cottage is one of the most common. Mediterranean, a Japanese style landscape design. There are so many. These are essentially recipes or patterns. Some of them have cultural significance. I like to call them recipes, but for what it's worth, I'm often approached as a landscape designer. People ask me, what is my style? What is the term that describes what I like? And they'll show me these pictures of what they like. Sometimes there isn't a perfect term. Of course, there's always words, there's adjectives we can use to describe what you like, but there isn't always necessarily a perfect style that describes what you're going for. And that is okay. That's why pictures, I know these are such a trope, the most common saying ever, but picture's worth 1,000 words. Sometimes when I'm working with a client, I'll be like, we'll be discussing what they like, and I'll say, great, let's just show me these pictures. Let's start looking at pictures. Show me what you like about these pictures and also what you don't like about them. And that provides so much more information. So if you feel like you're a combination of styles, or you're not sure how to describe, anybody who's watching, if you're not sure how to describe your landscape design style, if you're seeking out, how do I describe it? If your end goal is to, as efficiently as possible, enjoying the process, of course, but also efficiently creating that landscape design bringing your landscape design to life, starting with just pictures that you love. That's going to be the most efficient thing. And then I can always help you describe what you've found, but it might not be a perfect style, and that is okay. It's perfectly okay. And so I'd love to talk about your ground cover plantings now. And visual people, yes, there's often, you might not know what you like about a photo. You just know you like it, and that's perfect. That's the information that you need to help you bring that vision to life. Another thing, before I forget, and then I want to talk ground cover. If you have a space that's a yard that's fenced in, for example, you have a wooden fence as a backdrop, finding inspiration that includes a fence, that can be really helpful. Ask ChatGPT or whatever robot that you're using at the time to help you come up with prompts and search terms to help you describe, so you can get more specific, longer search terms to use when you're searching. Pinterest, House is another great source of inspiration, even just Google Images. But getting a little help developing those search terms can help you find more specific, inspiring photographs. If you have a retaining wall, for example, in your yard, if there is, I had a client recently who had a stone wall, like a very light gray colored stone wall instead of a fence. It was a very tall stone wall surrounding her entire yard. And she started with inspiration that reflected that. That can make a really big difference. It can really level up what you're working with. So ground cover plantings. For now, you're using mulch and you're having a hard time establishing ground covers in between. And are you still here? Share Insta, at Share Insta. So the folks who are on YouTube, if you comment, I can have your comment pop up on the screen. The folks who are on Instagram, I'm going to move you over here. I can't quite have that pop up yet. I'm developing my fancy live streaming setup 1 week at a time. Everybody keep joining in Thursdays, 2:30 p.m. Pacific time, same time zone as Los Angeles. You'll see every week it'll be a little bit of a different setup here. So yes, you're still here. Wonderful. So ground cover plants, you're starting with a mulched area first. That's perfect. That is a really common mistake for folks to, an example is, I want to plant creeping thyme instead of having that as my lawn. I want a large area of creeping thyme. Starting with mulch is perfect. It's really difficult to get a perfect mat of a ground cover planting established. I think I was struggling with what to put between my raised beds. Gotcha. So you're planting a ground cover to kind of fill in that space in the pathways. Is that correct? It's challenging and it's really slow. It's one of the more difficult things to achieve in a landscape. Right plant, right place is going to be incredibly important. So researching a plant that is happy to grow in those exact conditions. And even so, if you're looking for plants that you can walk on, creeping thyme's the most common example. Another example, blue star creeper is another one. There's these plants. A lot of folks will approach this like an alternative to lawn. They're really tricky. So if you're struggling with this, if it's taking a long time, it's not you. It's just the nature of getting these ground cover plants rolling. I'm so glad to hear you started with mulch though, because that's the mistake folks make. They'll start by they'll clear an area. It'll be bare exposed soil, and then they'll plant as many of these little 4-inch pots of ground cover as they can afford, and then instantly if the space fills up with weeds before those ground covers can get rolling. You're trying to be low maintenance, and there are a ton of weeds in your neighborhood. Yes. The space in between, raised, and I'm guessing these are like raised vegetable garden beds. It's really tricky to keep the weeds down in a space like that. Deep mulch is one of the best ways. Ground cover plants, unfortunately, are not the best at competing with weeds. And I keep using creeping thyme as an example because it's one of the most common ones. And it just paints that picture of, it's typically a shorter plant. It kind of grows and then roots, and then it grows and then roots. These smaller plants, ground cover plants, a lot of annual plants and a lot of herbaceous perennials, unfortunately don't compete with weeds as well as plants, larger herbaceous perennials, shrubs, and trees. And it's because of, I could geek out about this all day. It's because of something called ecological succession. your yard is a part of an ecosystem, and there's this tendency where when soil's exposed, first thing to come in are going to be these smaller plants, annual plants, herbaceous perennials, and then over time, in most ecosystems, the landscape will gradually transition into larger things, trees and shrubs, and then there's shrubs and trees, and then there's larger trees that take a long time to get established. And there's the weeds that come up, and weeds can sometimes be really good plants. They can be plants that are from another place that are really aggressive, and their role in an ecosystem is to cover the soil as quickly as possible. Ooh, I've got some more questions coming in on YouTube. I'm going to pop these up. Thank you so much. I'm going to keep coming back to these. Perfect. Yeah, and in general, there's always going to be some weed pressure. So at Share, instead, the short thing, the best thing I can provide as far, like this is a tricky thing to do in general, is to have an area covered with ground cover mulch, because this ground cover can only do so much to compete with weeds. So are you asking about cedar mulch as a possibility or pea gravel? What do I think about pea gravel for certain areas? I find there's fewer weeds in mulch, woody mulch material, so undecomposed organic woody mulch. So I'm talking about bark or wood chips. There's slightly fewer weeds. If you live in a high weed pressure area, there's slightly fewer weeds in those materials than in gravel, believe it or not. Something about gravel, also in wood chips, in the process of decomposition, it's just a slightly less hospitable environment for seeds to germinate in, but there still will be some. There still will be plenty. Making sure you're mulching deep enough is going to help. So typically at least 3 inches. It's going to prevent anything below from germinating, right? So 2 to 3 inches of mulch, that's going to stop things from germinating from below. And then any weed seeds that are blowing in or coming in, from birds that fly over and drop weed seeds, right? There's all kinds of ways that weed seeds are just in the air, entering the environment. Those seeds are still going to come up in mulch. There's going to be fewer, though, compared to gravel. So you're on the right track. There's no perfect solution in this case as far as how to have that space, if you have a pathway material in between raised beds, unless you go with something that's a little bit more impermeable, we're talking hardscaping, having pavers that are pretty tight together, those are going to be less maintenance. It's going to experience fewer weeds. But yes, if you live in and making sure less water hits that space, that can also help. So if you have, here in the Pacific Northwest, you have drier summers. And so as long as there's no irrigation hitting those pathways, that's going to help as well. And when it comes to pea gravel specifically, I like a crushed gravel way more than a pea gravel, because pea gravel tends to move around a lot. It's lots of little mini marbles basically. And so when you step on it, it tends to squish. It's not as fun to push a wheelbarrow through. So if I go with a gravel material, I'm usually recommending a crushed gravel. But again, even a gravel material, I find that gravel, there's slightly more weeds will come up in a gravel space. And when you have gravel, you do have the option to use something like a weed burner. So we're getting y'all into the nitty-gritty details of some of these materials. I love talking about this stuff. But yes, it's if it helps, it's not you. It's just the fact that ground covers, they are often sold as these really low maintenance solutions, but they can only do so much to compete with certain weed species. So you're absolutely on the right track. If you find the look of ground covers beautiful, just keep going. You're always going to be dealing with weeds. And yes, some ground covers, anything that's covering the soil, there's going to be fewer. As ground covers get a little bit denser, it's taking up more of that space. Over time, there's going to be fewer, but there's always going to be any creeping time, kinnikinnick pathway, even blue star creeper. I've always been, like, in spaces that I've maintained, there's always going to be some grass and some weeds coming up, and you have to move through and weed that. Also, when you pull weeds out, top dress with the little patches of mulch, that can be helpful too. Wonderful. And so let me grab these comments from YouTube. So I'm always afraid I'll plant ground cover and spend the rest of my life trying to control it. Yeah, that's not impossible. It depends on the species. Some ground cover we wish would grow faster, and then there's some species, some types of ground cover that might be a little bit too aggressive and do a little bit too well. I have some that I don't like, especially. I'm not a big fan of like Angelina sedum. It's like a really common, like chartreuse green. Creeping Jenny. I don't like Creeping Jenny. I'm surprised that one isn't is that people are like, it's not considered a proper like invasive species in this area. I find thyme does better than creeping to outcompete weeds. Great point. That, as you say that, thyme is a larger plant. It's going to be a little bit taller, it's denser, it's going to shade out, it's going to cover more of the soil, and that's going to do better at preventing weeds, larger plants, trees, shrubs, all of these things. As you, the largest, the densest plantings you can, those things are going to be covering that soil and preventing weeds. Of course, in a pathway, planting larger things may or may not be practical in that case. But that's, another thing at Share Insta, if foregoing the ground cover and then just having the option to top dress your mulch just every now and then with another couple inches of fresh, again, organic woody mulch material, so bark or wood chips, that's going to help. And you did mention cedar. Cedar is naturally, there's a term for it, it's called allelopathic. It has just the mildest seed germination inhibitor, which can be helpful. So cedar chips, wood chips decompose a little teeny tiny bit faster than bark because wood chips they're like a sponge. It's a fantastic material for mulching your garden. Wood chips, they will absorb a lot of moisture, whereas bark has like natural waxes in them, and so it repels moisture a little bit more, which means that it decomposes just slightly slower. But the trade-off again with cedar mulch is that cedar is naturally going to inhibit the growth of the germination of seeds. Now, I've still planted wildflower seed mixes over areas that have cedar chips, and it decreases that percentage, right? So I've spread, handfuls of native wildflower seeds over an area that was recent, just a few months prior had been spread, 4 inches of a mix of cedar chips and some big leaf maple chips. And I still had, dozens and dozens of wildflowers come up. You're inevitably in these materials, you're always going to be dealing with some of these weeds. So I'm glad I'm getting the feedback. You said awesome. I'm happy to hear this is helpful. And if you have anybody has any questions too, I'm happy to do some more Q&A. We've been talking about prioritizing how if you have too many ideas for your landscape, thinking about the maintenance activities that you enjoy the most or the maintenance activities that you dislike. That can help you prioritize, narrow down that list of ideas. We also I'm going to do a little bit of a repeat for those who are just jumping in. A couple different kinds of overwhelm that folks at the start of a landscaping project deal with. I call one blank canvas overwhelm, where it's like it's the same as like writer's block. When you look at this blank piece of paper, it's like, where do I even start? And then I have option overwhelm, or the too many ideas version, which is the category I tend to fit into, where I have a list of 1 billion ideas of what I would like to do in my yard. For any project, I could come up with unlimited ideas. So I would love to hear if anyone is struggling with maybe one or the other is resounding more with you. Or are you more of somebody who's, when you see this blank canvas, you get that like writer's block, essentially, that feeling of overwhelm? Or do you feel perhaps a little bit more like you have a million ideas and that you just don't know which is going to be right, where to start, how to prioritize your ideas? If you're watching the replay too, I still would love to hear. Yes, at Zooline1, always the idea overwhelm. You're in good company. So just to review, we talked about how form follows function. That was something we went into a lot of depth in the previous live stream. This was last week. Check out that replay. But how you would like to spend time in the space, the activities, the enjoyable activities, what you would like to do, that can help you prioritize. We talked about the site survey and how the characteristics of the space should be informing the layout of the design. And then also how inspiration, I talked about some tips on how to find the best, highest quality inspiration, how to prioritize if you have 1 million pictures on your Pinterest board, 1 million tabs in every garden magazine, how to prioritize that inspiration. And then we talked about how maintenance activities that can help you prioritize too, because if you have a list of 20 things that you would like to include in your landscape, 20 ideas, thinking about the ones that are going to just require the most time to maintain in general. And then also thinking about the maintenance activities that you enjoy the most or the least, that can really help you rank or prioritize. A few more tips. Talking to anybody in your life who's going to be spending time. I keep looking down at my notes here. If you see me look down, I want to make sure I'm remembering everything I wanted to talk about today. Talking to the people in your life who are going to be spending time in that space. Consider pets too. If you're somebody who wants to garden for wildlife counts. They are going to be spending time in your space. These are all things that can help you prioritize. So if you have grandkids that are going to visit, you have neighbors, you have friends that you like to host, anybody who lives and shares this space. This applies to, I do get this question, what if I'm landscaping for a project that's not necessarily a yard. I do help folks who are planning community projects and spaces. So anytime you're working with like a library, landscaping around the library, talking to the people in the community who are going to be spending time in that space, that should be the first place where you go, and that should help you prioritize what you're going to be doing in that space. It's easy to we know the people, and usually if we're designing for a yard, we have people in our life who are going to be spending time in this yard. We have an idea of what they enjoy doing. We have an idea of what they want. But asking a lot of questions, doing even a proper interview, sitting down and spending some time really diving deep into, of all the ideas, which are most important to them? How do they most enjoy spending time in the space? What are happy memories of time that they had spending time in outdoor spaces? All of these things can help you prioritize of your 1 million ideas, which are going to be the most important. And prioritizing when you have too many ideas, it's not only important for just narrowing down to making it physically possible for you to do all of these ideas in the space. Like we might have a limited space. You might have limited resources, a limited budget. It's also, this can help you, this prioritization will help you plan your installation phases too. What steps are you going to take first? What's most important for you to have done and established in that landscape first and foremost? This is why I have folks who are in my course put things in number order. And it can be a painful process for some people in this course to have to not just make that list. You all are getting a little bit of behind the scenes here because I often I'll feed steps to students one at a time. So the first thing is just make a list of everything. And that alone can feel overwhelming sometimes. Just get everything out on paper. And then the behind the scenes is, I don't tell anybody this yet, but then the next step is you have to rank and prioritize. Every single one has to have a number. And it has to be, then we sort it. I use just a quick spreadsheet, Google Sheets. Then once we give everything a number, we sort it in number order. Working backwards can be helpful. Again, removing one at a time. So if you have 20 ideas, okay, what's the easiest one to take off the list if you could only do 19? Okay, what's the next one if you could only do 18? And removing things one at a time, that sometimes doing it backwards like that can be really helpful. Humans are simple creatures. Really, we are simple creatures. That's just a prioritization trick. It can be so helpful. Having everything in steps like that, we follow those steps as we're staring at a blank canvas and we're trying to, what do I draw first on this blank canvas? This prioritized, this ranked list of what you would like in the landscape is going to help you. If you have too many ideas, as painful as it is, this process is so incredibly important. So, I got another question. It's my favorite bomb-proof plant. So the most indestructible plant, the most hardy plant. So I have a follow-up question for you. What kind of plant do you have in mind? So you're looking for something that maybe. So if I'm looking for a plant that's indestructible, my follow-up question is a little bit more of the context because there can be different versions, right? If we're talking about a plant that can grow in really hot, dry conditions where it gets almost no attention, that's going to be a very different plant from a plant that's somebody who's new to gardening and is looking for something that's going to be really rewarding and really difficult to kill if it's a little bit more neglected. So in general, I start with native plants. Not all native plants are easy to grow, I will say that. Overall hardy, showy, and long bloom time. Man, this is one of those questions because it's like choose your favorite plants. I'm going to have to give categories, I think. That's the only way I can properly answer. Again, starting with native plants. Not all native plants are going to be tough, but we're narrowing down of all the thousands and thousands of plants you could choose. I start by narrowing that list down into native plants. And from there, I like to go with things. Right now, here I'm in the Pacific Northwest, so northwest corner of the United States, west of the Cascades. We're dealing with the weather, the climate is shifting. We're getting hotter and drier summers. We're getting, at this point, maybe not this year, but relatively consistent rainfall, but it's happening. Instead of these days and days of long, drawn-out, misty rains, we're getting just a lot of rain will dump all at once. So we're dealing with hotter and drier conditions. So I'm leaning toward the native plants plants that are native to my area, but that are slightly more heat and drought tolerant than what has been normal for the past, couple hundred years, really. We're leaning into things that are slightly more heat tolerant, and then leaning into things that are, I love in general, something that's like a smaller shrub, because a lot of folks will lean toward, for something with a long bloom period, will lean toward herbaceous perennials. So these are, you think about echinacea, right? Something that'll grow, it'll flower, and then in the winter it goes dormant completely, but it'll come back from the same root system. We're a really big fan of using shrubs or even dwarf shrubs in the landscape because they're going to be slightly lower maintenance. In general, they're going to maintain some, even a deciduous shrub that loses its leaves, it's still going to maintain a woody structure in the winter. And so within that category, I'm trying to narrow it down. My favorites are plants that are things that are going to be happy with the weather that we have, the soil that we have, which tend to be native plants, leaning into the slightly more heat tolerant native plants, and then leading into things that are a little bit lower maintenance that are, I find, tend to be moving into the category of things that are shrubs. So that is a terrible answer to your question, because I know you're looking for some specific favorites. And I could talk about, if you're local to my area, I could talk about specific native plants. I love the combination of, I'm really enjoying right now just using yarrow and butterfly milkweed. I like showy milkweed right now, and ceanothus and kinnikinick and Douglas aster and goldenrod and pearly everlasting and my goodness, I could keep going. And red flowering currant and Oregon grape. Those ocean spray is another great one. These combinations of plants, a full sun native plant garden, that's my go-to, my fastest, just like a recipe for if I'm doing a landscaping project. Okay, glad to hear I'm on the right track with my non-answer answer. I recognize that this isn't the answer you're going for. And then if you want to move into non-natives too, I love evergreen shrubs that are drought tolerant, dwarf evergreen shrubs that are drought tolerant. I love abelias. I love Daphnes are sort of drought tolerant sometimes. Just anything that's going to hold its leaves all year that has some interesting foliage. So if I'm cheating, I love prioritizing native plants as much as possible. When I cheat on native plants, it's usually to incorporate some of these, again, these really tough tried and true shrubs that are going to hold their own. Loropetalum is another favorite of mine. Purple leaves, it's evergreen in my climate, and it gets hot pink flowers. I could go on all day. This is a dangerous question, so thank you so much for asking. Yes, and anything in particular, too, that anybody would like some help with. I've got one last category of things, just in general, when you have too many ideas, what to prioritize in your space, or how to prioritize these ideas. It seems silly, but in certain gardening workshops, I will do a values prioritization exercise where you start with a list of, if you just Google a list of common values and you circle your top 10 and then again do that reverse, eliminate one at a time. It's really interesting which values, personal values. So I'm talking about sustainability. So some of my favorites are creativity, growth, love. Starting with a list of values like that, you can see it seems so silly. We're talking about landscape design. I hear everybody like this is a stretch. If you're just jumping on too, we've talked about all of the practical normal landscape design tips, but this is another angle sometimes when folks are feeling, if I'm working with a student who is feeling a little bit overwhelmed and they're still struggling to prioritize what they want to put, what's most important to them to install first, second, and so on. It feels like a stretch, but this values exercise, prioritizing what are your personal values, anybody else who's sharing the space, and seeing which elements in their landscaping project are going to match up with those values. That can also be another, it's again, seems like a stretch, but it works. And it gets you into a different mindset too, where you're thinking about what is most important to you. What do you value most as a person? We're thinking deep. And landscapes to me are they're about so much more than just a decoration for a house. Yes, aesthetics, beauty, they're incredibly important, but it's not, my favorite kind of landscaping projects are living spaces, outdoor living spaces for people, for wildlife. I see you on Instagram. We've got Jacob Bradley Jacob. You said bees. There's something that you're saying that this is something that you value, that's important to you in your landscaping project. Yes, gardening for wildlife. Creating a space is like our interior spaces are, if you're an interior designer, you're planning your what furniture is going to go where in your house. Your environment, environmental design, this environmental psychology, I'm trying to say, is so important. It influences your behavior as a human being, as humans are simple creatures. But what's interesting is when you're doing landscape design, you're planting a garden, your yard is a part of an ecosystem inevitably. And it has an impact on things beyond maybe some of the things that we do, like in our homes, the furniture choices, where we source things. All of this has an impact. But our outdoor spaces are inevitably going to be shared with other living creatures. And it's inevitably going to have, it's a part of an ecosystem. So there's that influence on that space that is felt significantly more than when you're doing, an indoor construction project, right? It's another layer to this. So these are just so many different ways. If you are prioritizing, when you have too many ideas, how can you get these priorities to the surface? How do you then know the phases of installation, what you should prioritize first, second, and third through that process? All of this is helpful. And I'm happy. Anybody who's just jumping on, I see no new folks jumping on live right now. If you have questions about your garden project, I'm going to hang out for a few more minutes and happy to do just open Q&A. Anybody who's starting a landscaping or garden project, you're improving some things, I am going to drop in the chat. Those of you who are interested in learning more this spring, I've got some cool stuff coming up. So you're in the loop. Weekly, we're doing these live streams. Bring your questions. If you're working on a project, this is a fantastic opportunity to, if you're stuck on anything, get some traction. I've got a workshop coming up on Saturday. It's all about soil. So I'm calling it Soil 101 for gardeners. It's kind of the basic soil skills that you need. I find that when you get a soil test done, a lot of folks will be like, okay, I did the test. Now what? What do I do with this information? Or just have the confidence to know you've done enough for your soil to start establishing your garden. There are these basic skills that I'm going to make as fun as soil can possibly be. That is my goal. And great. Oh, we got how to buy bulk soil for a planter side that's like hard clay. Ooh, great question. So yeah, it sounds like soil is right. That workshop could be right up your alley there. Let me grab the link for that. I'll drop that, and then I'm happy to answer that right now and give you some help live today. So I'll put the link to that. Oh, hello, tuning in from Germany. That's fantastic. Thank you for being here. And I got a question. Book recommendations for a small garden. I'll get right back to that. I've got so many little windows here. This link first. So I think now that link for the soil workshop is both on Instagram and YouTube now. Tuning in from Germany. Glad to have you. Oh, book recommendations for a small garden. So when you say small garden, I've got a follow-up question for you. So you're looking for design ideas for a smaller space. Are you hoping to grow food? Are you hoping to support wildlife? Is there anything in particular that is really inspiring you right now or is going to be part of your main focus for this project? Because that'll help in particular. And one thing I do have is I've got a YouTube video that focuses on design tips for small landscapes, for small yards. Let me pull that up right now. I think this might make noise. Please don't make noise. Okay, good. It didn't. Drum roll as I grab this link. Keep going with the questions. Yes,
this is my favorite dentist.
Come on, YouTube with the ads. Let me know. Yes, you're looking for design ideas. You live in zone 10B. 10B. That is a lot warmer than I am used to growing in. It means you can grow so many more cool things. Jealous. Let me see here. My small design tips for small yards. Coming right up. Here comes that link. So I have a resource. The reason I'm just providing this instead of a book recommendation, just as a start, I created this video just for the situation that you are dealing with. Here you are. Hey, tuning in from Southern California. Great. Glad to have you. Yes, so start here with this YouTube video. It has some tips. And then I don't have a book recommendation that focuses specifically on design ideas for small yards. One that I do enjoy, I'm scanning my bookshelf right now to see if I can spot it. So I can just show it to you right now. As far as getting ideas for different layouts, oh, that's why I can't find it. I think my computer is sitting on it. Hold tight. This country garden planner, this is one that's just really common in the library systems. It's by Country Home Magazine, and it just has a series of ideas, and a lot of the spaces, the gardens in this book, it has little garden bed plans and layouts, and let's see if I can, it's never going to focus, but it just has a lot of pictures of varying styles of landscapes, and so I will hold it up. Country Garden Planner is just one of many for getting inspiration, but then following, I think looking for... so I mentioned a little bit earlier if you get some help from ChatGPT or whatever your favorite friendly robot is to help you develop some of these keywords. Awesome, glad that this is helpful. Help you come up with more specific keywords for searching for inspiration. So pictures on Pinterest, on houses, another great source, and just even Google Images in general. I like to use our friendly robots to get more specific with some of these search terms to find better pictures of inspiration. And then for design principles and practices, again, that YouTube video should be the way to go. Wonderful. So I do see I got questions coming in on Instagram. Thank you for being here. Oh my goodness, everyone. In California, I was able to grow so much. I just moved to Alabama, and now I need to learn how and what I can grow in red clay. Red clay is going to be a different story. So let's see here. Let me grab this link. So if you were just tuning in, I haven't seen quite how long you've been in the live stream here, but I'm going to put this link again. Coming up on Saturday, I've got a workshop on soil basics that could help with just in general soil skills when it comes to red clay. And buying bulk soil, I haven't missed that question either. But when it comes to red clay, clay in general, a lot of folks, their instinct is going to be add sand to increase drainage. But sand and clay together, if you have true clay soil, that can create concrete. The sand isn't necessarily going to add. What your soil really needs is more of like a sponginess, and that's decomposed organic matter is going to be the way to go. So that's compost. Avoiding really high nitrogen compost can be very important for garden beds and landscapes. A lot of these plants don't need that nitrogen, and then that's something that's just going to wash away, and that can be really hard on groundwater. It's a pollutant if you have too much nitrogen. So compost and manure, it's really high nitrogen. So if you are purchasing compost, I like something like a decomposed bark material or something like that. I'm getting into the nitty-gritty details here, but yes, organic matter tends to be the solution when you have a lot of clay. But you don't necessarily always have to mix. Some people will mix it in, depends on the specific type of clay you're working with. Reach out to local gardeners, get regional best practices. But even just putting organic matter on the soil surface can help too. Soil life will bring a lot of organic matter down. Mulching properly, mulching with an organic material, wood chips, bark nuggets are my favorite. I'm not the biggest fan of bark dust. It's not the worst, but I like bark nuggets. My very favorite material for mulching is arborist chips because it has this mix. So arborist chips are wood chips. When arborists are pruning trees, they just kind of grind everything up, leaves, needles, twigs, trunks, all of that material is kind of a mix. So you have these leaves and needles are going to have a little bit of nitrogen. It's a perfect amount. It's very slow release as it decomposes. The smaller materials decompose first, and then you have the wood chips that stay behind. Soil life loves it. It's great at conserving moisture in the soil and moderating the soil temperature. And it's incredible. And just mulching an area with arborist chips, soil life will gradually, over time, will bring some of that organic matter down. So let's see, buying bulk soil for a planter side that's like hard clay. So tell me more about a planter side that's like hard clay. So are you filling up a planter that's currently empty? Is the idea, or is that a new garden bed in really hard clay soil? Because if so, that is a similar answer to previously shared. Again, if you're bringing in soil, you can from a soil suppliers. There's usually a couple of different offerings. There's a mix. It'll be like a blend of sand and compost, and sometimes native soil. Sometimes they'll do sand, compost, native soil, and like super compost or something like that. Again, that's typically more. It's going to be compost and manure, and that's going to be more nitrogen than is good for most flower gardens. So be careful with it, not bringing in too much of that. And then again, my favorite, like the safest material, my favorite compost to bring in is going to be a decomposed like fir bark or something like that. It tends to be like mulch that never sold, that has been composted and decomposed into compost. That is the way to go. So great. I see some folks who are saying, oh, that's so kind of you. I'm glad to hear that these have been helpful, that you're learning. Any follow-up questions for whatever you're working on? I love doing this, helping everybody with their garden projects. Thanks for making my dream job possible. This is a ton. I love doing this. I love landscapes and gardens and what they do for humans, and so happy to help. On Instagram, we got a few more questions. Where'd my Instagram window go? Haha. Oh, you're going to be here on Saturday. Juliana Phillips, you said, thank you so much. I can't wait to see you. This is my first time teaching this soil workshop in this format. It's just Soil 101 for gardeners. And it's the basics, how to, when you're dealing with different situations. My goal is for you to walk away with just basic soil skills and context. So you know the materials, the options, when you would use different methods or different amendments. So when you're experiencing different situations with your garden projects, you have an idea of the tools and the options and the strategies, so you know what is best to do when in general. Of course, it's an 1.5-hour workshop. It's not a degree in soil science, but I think that there are just so many incredible soil basics that just aren't shared enough. I think it's just not as flashy as some of the other garden topics. So in California, so let me catch up. I feel like I missed one. Oh yeah, wireback candles. I struggle with overplanting in your small space. If there's an open space, I overestimate the amount of space that I have. I ordered a limelight prime tree. I might have overdone it again. Yes, and I am someone who's also gardening in a limited space, and it's tough. I wish I had better advice for that. Oh man, overestimating the amount of space. Yeah, thinking about mature plant size is really important, because when you buy a plant and it's this big and it's adorable, and you plant it and it says on the tag that it's going to grow to be 6 to 8 feet tall and wide, it's hard to believe it, especially, a plant will sit for a little while at first. It'll take, if you've ever heard, I've shared this just recently in a YouTube video, but there's this poem, this saying in the gardening world: first year plants sleep, second they creep, third year they leap. So you'll plant this little 4-inch plant, and it's like this tall. And the first year, it's just going to sit there. And the second year, it's going to it's got a few new leaves. And then by the end of the second year is when folks are normally like, when is this going to start happening? It's going to take 800 years for my garden to grow in. And then that third year, whoop, it's going to double. And then the fourth year, it doubles again. And then the growth is a curve like this. And it takes a little while for it to start picking up. But then, so you have to imagine when you plant these little tiny plants, it takes so much time. But a plant this big can grow to be, we take a tree seedling, right? Any size, but it's so common. You see on the plant tag, 6 to 8 feet tall and wide. You plant this here, and then you have like 3 to 4 feet before the next plant. Like, that's proper plant spacing. You have to give it room, so when it fills in, it grows. It has room to exist. You can layer some things, right, that have an overhead canopy and a ground layer, but you have to space plants thinking about what it's going to be once it's filled in. And such a common mistake and a common urge is to, I have this tiny plant, nothing's happening, I'm just going to plant more stuff. That's a very common error. That also, then what it seems like wireback candles, what you're dealing with is just the love for plants too on top of that, and not having enough space. Vertical gardening can be fun. Learning about all of the different tall and skinny plants that you can have. Espalier apple trees and columnar apples are just like 2 great examples of, like, you can have so many things producing fruit. Trellises and any tall narrow systems. Thinking about vertical space, getting ideas on Pinterest. That's something that I will recommend to folks who are limited on, you bought a 5-foot tree. Yeah, welcome to the chaos of gardening. And what you could start doing is offering to help your neighbors with their gardens. I'm not gonna lie, I've started doing that. I'm kind of creeping into my neighbors' yards. Sometimes there's people who are more than happy to share some of that space, and getting into community garden projects too. That's been wonderful. So I've actually been in my town at just doing this, like, community neighborhood beautification projects. It's a huge huge passion of mine. And then once you have your spaces established and filled in, you can be propagating additional plants from it. It's so much fun. So we've been doing. There's a store in a town like that, just landscaping native with native plants around the storefront, around an apartment building. There's a space that just needed a little bit of love, and we're actually starting to get more and more community support and resources for that too. It's been so much fun. So if you're looking to if you're looking to keep going, could be an idea. Just throwing that out there. I mean, that's part of why I do what I do here. I love helping people with their garden projects because my yard is full. So anyway, thank you all for being here. I'm going to drop another link in the chat if you are interested in some additional landscape design help this spring. I've got a wait list going. There's some really cool things. So we got the soil workshop coming up, doing these weekly live streams. So I have my course, Design Your Own Landscape Layout, that's always available to help you through the design process, step-by-step guidance. And every spring, I do some really hands-on guidance. So we do like 6 weeks of live coaching calls and where you can get a ton of help and guidance through the process. So if you want to be on the wait list for help this spring, a lot of people will wait until spring until they get started on their projects or start reaching out to help. So please join the waitlist if you're interested. You'll be the first to hear about this program when it opens up. If you want to get those details, there's going to be early bird pricing and so on, and you're going to get priority. So if it fills up, the folks on the waitlist, they're going to get the first access to this. And Juliana Phillips, I see you just tagged me. Let me know if you have any additional questions. Can't wait to see you on Saturday. Wonderful. Thank you for being here. And if you're watching the replay, you watched till the end, please tell me. I'd love to hear that. Thank you so much, everyone. Wonderful. Now I need to find all of my buttons. Great. Have a great day, everybody.